Thank you for stopping by at the Movie Marquee. Our podcast reviews well-known movies and contains spoilers. The podcast may contain mature subject matter and mature language. Listener discretion is advised. Enjoy the show.
Quiet on set. Places, everybody. And action.
Welcome, everyone, to the Movie Marquee. Today's showing is the 1979 movie Rocky II. With me, as always, is Ken.
Condominiums? I never use them.
And Ted.
And who's that? Al Capone?
And I'm Eric. I think we ought to knock his block off. All right, it's my best Burgess Meredith right there. Hope it worked. All right, we're talking Rocky II, Electric Boogaloo, the sequel to the 1976 movie Rocky, which won the Academy Award for Best Movie. Will this one live up to the hype of the rematch? Stay tuned for our reviews, and we'll let you know. So, Ted, let's talk about the particulars of Rocky II.
Rocky II is directed by Sylvester Stallone and written by Sylvester Stallone. It comes in with a running time of 120 minutes. It was released June 15th, 1979. It had a budget of $7 million and a box office gross of $200.2 million. And it stars Sylvester Stallone as Rocky Balboa, Talia Shire as Adrian Balboa, Burt Young as Paulie Panino, Carl Weathers as Apollo, the Master of Disaster, Creed, Burgess Meredith as Mickey, Tony Burton as Tony Duke Evers, and Sylvia Meals as Apollo Creed's wife.
Cool. And I have up here, we will not make the same mistake as we did in the first one for all of our listeners. I will not call Burt Young Burt Ward as I did throughout the first one. We'll give him his credit here. All right, what are the reviews?
Rotten Tomatoes comes in with a critic score of 72% and an audience score of 82%. And finding actual written reviews of this particular movie is actually kind of difficult. I only found a couple on each side. Well, the negative critic that I found was Janet Maslin of the New York Times, and she didn't care for Rocky the first time around, so she had to say Rocky II has a waxy feeling, and it never comes to life the way its predecessor did. And for positive critics, we have Bob Thomas of the AP. He says, Rocky II contains the flaws of the original. Simplistic characterizations, saccharine romance, and a tendency to cuteness. But it also fills the heart and quickens the pulse.
That's the positive review?
Mm-hmm. You
okay.
bet. And the staff of Variety says, Stallone and producers Irwin Winkler and Robert Chartoff know from experience audiences love to root for the underdog and have concocted an irresistible final 30 minutes. I don't know what they thought about the rest of the movie, but okay. But the most interesting was I couldn't find a written review from either Gene Siskel or Roger Ebert, but I was able to pull the review of Rocky II from their TV show. And this was before At the Movies. It was a show that was on WTTW PBS in Chicago. It was the predecessor to At the Movies. It was called Sneak Previews. And both absolutely adored Rocky II. Gene Siskel called it a fairy tale for adults, and Ebert said that Rocky II is a real sequel, not a ripoff like most sequels. They both gave it a yes to see at the movies, and I was shocked, to say the least, to how much these two men absolutely had glowing things to say about this movie.
They made it sound like it was just as good as the original.
Yeah, oh yeah. They both were giddy and enthusiastic about seeing Rocky III, and then they both tore Rocky III apart.
Gene Siskel actually creamed in his pants while he was talking about this. He was so excited about this movie.
It's something if you can look it up on YouTube. I don't know if they were caught up in the fact that this is a sequel that just didn't blow, because sequels normally suck. And then they were happy that it didn't just suck out loud.
Yeah, but you're coming 5 years off of The Godfather 2.
Which is the best sequel of all time.
Yeah, so I mean it's not like there's
not
no...
even close.
But I'm saying it's not like there's a very recent history in 1979 of a great sequel movie.
Well, so, I think what it is, you're coming off one of the worst sequels of all time, Jaws 2, the year before. And I'm sure they probably are looking forward for something to latch on to sequel-wise. Don't tell me you like Jaws 2, Eric.
Better than Jaws 3.
Nothing is as good as Jaws 3D, though.
Oh, yeah. Jaws 2 is not a great sequel. I've seen worse, obviously. But yes, you're coming off of one of the greatest movies of all time, in my opinion. That's pretty hard to beat. I mean, Godfather probably has really done it. Cool.
They made a whole movie about the Jawas from Star Wars? Oh, Jaws. Oh, gotcha.
Are you okay, Ted?
Yeah.
Are you having a stroke?
Going to Quincy tomorrow. He's not okay.
Okay. The Jawas. That would be a great movie. Why don't we have a Jawa movie?
Wootini.
Why didn't George Lucas do a Jawa movie?
Because everybody would hate it now. So
would they?
Oh, yes. People are going to find something to complain about.
Well, the Jawas don't speak. They just go Jawa, Jawa, Jawa.
Wootini.
So, Ken, tell us about the plot of Rocky II.
On New Year's Day in 1976, World Heavyweight Boxing Champion Apollo Creed has successfully defended his title in a split decision against challenger Rocky Balboa. Apollo and Rocky are taken to the same hospital. Despite the mutual agreement not to seek a rematch, Apollo challenges Rocky again to prove that the fight was no fluke, which Rocky declines and retires from professional boxing. Rocky then has surgery for a detached retina, a condition that could lead to permanent blindness. After the surgery, Rocky goes to see a recuperating Apollo and wants a truthful response to his question of whether Apollo gave his all in the fight. Creed confirms that he did. After Rocky is released from the hospital, he proposes to Adrian in a zoo. She happily accepts, and then they marry in a small ceremony.
Yeah. I have a question. How did you find out that it was a detached retina?
That's just some people are saying that.
So you're assuming.
Because they never comment as to what exactly is wrong. If that's what it is, and you found that, that's awesome.
Saying, so.
Bravo, bravo.
She happily accepts, and they marry in a small ceremony. Soon after, Adrian reveals that she is pregnant. Meanwhile, fueled by the hate mail claiming that the fight was fixed in order to protect his reign as champ, Apollo becomes obsessed with the idea that a rematch is the only way to prove that Rocky's performance was simply a fluke. Apollo demands his team to do whatever is necessary to goad Rocky out of retirement. Rocky at first seems unaffected by Apollo's smear campaign, but his inexperience with money causes him to run into financial problems. Rocky's trouble with reading ends any money he could have made through endorsements. I had the same problem. Rocky finds it difficult to get employment. Rocky visits Mickey, his trainer and manager, about the possibility of fighting again. Mickey declines out of concern for Rocky's eye, but he changes his mind after Apollo publicly insults Rocky on TV. Adrian confronts Rocky about the dangers of returning to the boxing ring and reminds him of the risk to his eyesight. Rocky insists that he knows nothing else, so this is the only way he can provide for them. Adrian, disappointed at the fact that Rocky broke his promise, refuses to support him. What a bitch.
Really?
Commentary here.
What the hell, man?
All right.
Jeez. She's worried about the poor guy.
He's going to have the women's league after Ken here.
He can barely talk and he can't see. I mean...
But she's going to go to work and lift heavy things while she's pregnant. I think that's a little unfair, don't you think?
I'd be more concerned about how the city of Philadelphia turned their back on him and wouldn't even give him a job at McDonald's.
Yeah, you would think somebody would give him a job.
No one would give him a job. I mean, yeah, he was wearing a pretty bad suit, but I mean, he'd go in there and it's like...
But it's the 70s. Everybody's wearing a bad suit.
I know. You don't have a high school education. You have no skills. Have you ever thought of doing just labor? It's like, this guy just almost beat the champ. And this is how you treat him?
Yeah, you would think that they would be able to do better for him.
I couldn't believe how everyone just turned their back on him. I'm sitting there going, this guy's going to employment agencies and just not getting jobs.
And how many times have you seen commercials where the celebrity doesn't even say anything? He just gives you a look or a thumbs up or whatever the case may be. Anyway, back to the story.
This is the same guy that they end up building a statue to. Philadelphia turned their back on him.
Oh, that's because he beat a black man. So we know how racist Philadelphia is.
Wow,
you are on a roll today.
You're on one tonight.
Ken might have to be replaced in some of these upcoming episodes.
Some of these things might be edited out after I get to them.
Maybe.
So, all right, back to our story. So Rocky and Mickey begin training, but Rocky is unfocused due to Adrian's disapproval. Adrian's brother, Polly, confronts her about not supporting her husband. Adrian faints during the confrontation and is rushed to the hospital. where
I
she
thought
goes into
Polly
labor.
hit her. Didn't Polly hit her?
Nope, Polly did
Okay.
not hit her. No,
I saw
he
it
just
differently,
yelled at
but
her.
okay.
He knocked out some kind of like animal food out of her hand. That's about all he did. Despite being born premature and with his own toupee, the baby is healthy.
Jeez. Right.
Get out of my hair.
Now you're going after poor babies?
Wow, kid
I
did have
mean,
a lot of hair, but come
It had
on.
a lot.
I've seen kids
Polly
with
was
having-
jealous.
I saw
Yeah.
little babies that had a lot of hair like that.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, dude. Wow. Don't be
Coma.
making fun of the dog next.
Yeah,
I
here we
mean,
go. Yeah, bring us
Oh.
down. The coma.
Well,
Okay.
there's a lot of time left in this podcast, so we'll never
Yeah.
know what might happen. All right, so Adrian falls into a coma. Rocky refuses to leave her bedside and will not go see his new baby until the baby can be together with his mother. When Adrian comes out of her coma, she finds Rocky by her bedside, and the couple are soon shown their new baby, a boy, which they name Rocky Jr. Rocky tells Adrian that he's not willing to fight Creed, but Adrian tells Rocky that she wants him to do one thing: win. Win. With Adrian's blessing, Rocky is now focused and trains hard for the fight. On Thanksgiving, the night of the match, Apollo makes a public go of beating Rocky in a no more than 2 rounds to prove that the first match, going the distance, was a fluke. In order to protect his vulnerable eye and confuse Apollo, Rocky opts to fight right-handed. As a result, he is knocked down twice by Creed and outclassed for much of the fight. Going into the 15th and final round, Creed is well ahead on points and only needs to stay away from Balboa to win the fight by decision. However, Creed wants to win by knockout in order to erase any doubts and ignores his trainer's plea to stay back. In the final round, Rocky switches back to his natural stance and in dramatic fashion unleashes a series of counterpunches on Creed and begins to turn the tide. Both men, exhausted, trade punches until Rocky's able to gain the upper hand and knocks Creed down. The blow causes Rocky to also lose his balance and fall at the same time. As both men struggle to regain their feet, Rocky is able to will himself up at the count of 9 while Apollo collapses from exhaustion, giving Rocky the win by knockout and making him the new heavyweight champion of the world. Rocky then gives a speech to the crowd and holds the belt over his head with his message for his wife, who is watching the fight on TV. Yo, Adrian! I did it! The end.
That's awesome. Now that we're just going on like fending people and insulting lines, one of my favorite lines in this movie was the announcers.
the announcer,
like,
I've never
I-
seen this many
this many
Italians in one
Italian-
place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does-
I was like, damn, get it done.
and
we
then
just-
Stu Nahan's like, "Whoa, I'm
He-
backing away from
He's
that
like,
one."
I had nothing to do with that quote. I'm
Right.
Like,
Oh,
Jiminy
that's awesome.
Christmas. It's like all of a sudden somebody let Jimmy the Greek in here or something.
Right. Oh, Jimmy the Greek. That would have been awesome. So, Ted, when's the first time you saw this one? Do you remember?
I have no recollection of when I actually seen this movie for the first
Total
time.
blur. Yeah.
What I've come to the conclusion is I've seen 3 and 4 a lot more than 1 and 2, and it's not even by a small margin. I know I've seen it because the one thing that has always stuck out in my mind is Rocky training and chasing the chicken, and I
Yes.
always knew that was part of this particular movie.
Should have
Then
bit
of
the
course
head off
he
the chicken
wins.
when he caught it. That would have been awesome.
Go the full Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh yeah, total. That's what you should have done. Don't bite the head off Rock. All right, Ken. We know you saw it on cable, right?
I saw it on cable. I think I saw it, though, after 3. So this is
Okay.
one of those weird ones where when we got cable, Rocky 3 was the more popular one to watch. And so I think I watched 3 before 2. But of course, I already knew the ending to 2 because they show it at the freaking beginning of this movie. That's probably when I watched it, was probably sometime after Rocky 3.
And me, of course, my history. I saw Rocky 4 in the theater, second movie I ever saw in the theater, and then I watched all the Rockies after that on VHS. So I saw this sometime in 1985. But I haven't seen this movie in probably 15, 20 years. I haven't seen this movie. It's been a while. So
You
it's
and the
all,
rest of the country.
yeah, right. It's almost new to me. As I'm watching it, it's all starting to come back. So let's talk about some of the characters. They're practically the same characters from the first movie, just rolling over to the second movie. No one else is really new except for the dog, right? For the most part.
It's the same dog.
Yeah, but he
It
doesn't
doesn't-
have as big of a role.
True.
So
I like the dog. The dog.
But
Yeah.
you measure out in seconds? What the heck? There's no role here for this dog.
Yeah, there is.
sure there is.
No, there's not.
He goes everywhere Rocky goes.
He's on the bed.
He's not even
He's
in
a
the
good boy.
training like he is in the first movie where he trains and runs with him at least. I guess he goes with him to go see Mick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
then
he's a
he,
good
of course,
boy.
accuses him of not being a real canine.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you think? He's like an alien trapped inside that dog's body or something?
Well, he's able to talk to Rock on the same intellectual level. They have a lot in common. Yeah.
Maybe the dog should have did commercials.
Well, maybe the dog should have boxed. Who knows?
With the characters in this movie, it's really tough for me because I feel that just about every one of the characters takes a gigantic step backward in this movie instead of moving forward. And it's not by a little amount.
Let's dive into that. Let's talk about, we'll kick it off with Paulie. He's a great punching bag to talk about.
In the first movie, with Paulie, you had depth to the character. Here, we don't see him very often. And when we do, he's kind of detestable. And it's like, he really has no part. I mean, he's fully taken on the role of I guess what's supposed to be Sylvester Stallone's idea of what
he was detestable
low-level
in the first movie. This
Yeah,
just
I
is
don't
him
think-
coming full circle.
But he wasn't, but there was depth to it. There wasn't.
Really? Was there?
Yeah, I think there was. There was a real character there.
I don't see him being detestable here.
He doesn't have a conscience.
Because he's
what
an
does he
a-hole.
do what does he do that's worse than that he did in the film?
Nothing much. I think he
He's
was
not
Close to
detestable in
what
the
he did
first
in
one.
the first film.
Well, here's the thing. He's not an alcoholic now. He's just a jerk. There were lines that Paulie had in the first movie that added depth to the character, where he says that he's given up so much, but we take from that he had to grow up and take care of his sister, because there's obviously no parents involved, and he's become an alcoholic. Now we don't see him as an alcoholic. We see him as basically a low-level gangster, a low-level hood. All he does is he gives Rocky crap and makes Rocky
What?
feel like crap, makes Rocky feel like a jerk. He doesn't even say, "Do you want me to give you money?" He says, "What,
You want a
me to
handout?
give you a handout?"
You want a hand?
Yeah.
I'll
I'll give you a handout. Do you want a handout? I'll give you a
Want a
handout.
handout?
No, it's not the way he says it.
Yes,
He says it in a
that's-
very demeaning way.
Don't forget the beginning of the film. He tells Rocky that everybody's proud of him, and he's giving him such a wonderful.
That's the only
motivational
nice thing
speech.
he says in the entire movie.
No, it's not. Throughout the film, even when he's there and Rocky's training like a bum, Paulie's there worried about him.
He says Rocky should knock out his sister's teeth too.
But
I
that's
mean-
brother sisterly type of talk.
Is
you
it?
tell your sister, you
Heck-
tell your
Hell
brother-in-law
yeah.
to knock your sister's teeth out. Yeah,
If we were
no.
that close, I'm just kidding.
I mean,
My sister's okay.
no.
No,
He's-
Paulie's true colors come out in this movie. They're just amped up. He's an asshole.
I don't think
He
it's
is.
he's
He's
amped up
just
at
a
all.
complete jerk.
He
And
is.
he's the one that goes over there. Yeah, it was because she was working, but he berates her and she goes into premature labor.
She goes into premature labor because she was lifting heavy stuff earlier.
He
and
wasn't
finally caught up
helping
to
the
her.
situation.
He didn't help the situation, but but it was a month.
But if
early.
you listen to the doctor, it was because she was working and stressed. And she's
Yeah.
stressed because Rocky's training.
right?
And she's also stressed constantly because Paulie continually comes over and berating
Wait,
her.
it was one time that he came over and berated her. When was the other time?
One time too many.
Well, first of all, he's not that bad when he comes and berates her. And is he wrong?
She's horrible. He's
Is he
horrible
wrong?
to her. Yes.
Is he wrong? No, I don't think he's wrong.
You
No, he's
shouldn't
business.
talk to
I think
anybody
that's his
that
best
way.
friend. She's his sister in a way.
You
it
keep
is
throwing
kind of like
that
his
best
business.
friend card out.
Because he
No.
is his best friend.
No.
Who's his
No.
best
Nobody
friend? then?
should.
I don't
talk
think he
to-
has any friends.
See, that's just
That's
wrong,
part of
because
his
Rocky's
problem.
the nicest guy, and that's why Paulie is his best friend. And Paulie does have a heart for Rocky up to a certain point. Paulie is about himself, but Paulie does care about Rocky. And that's why he goes over to Adrian. And he does yell at her, but he doesn't physically touch her.
He
The
keeps
harassment
pushing.
lasts for it's 10 seconds long. It wasn't even a long berate. He barely yelled at her. She was going into labor no matter what that situation because she was physically overexerted herself and she was stressed out for Rocky. He told her the truth. He's messed up. He's going to get hurt because she doesn't want to support him in any type of way
But
when it
that's
comes to
not-
the fight.
That's not
That's
the way
what
he
he
put
said.
That's not the way he put it.
Yes,
He's
that's the way he put it.
He's
How
extreme.
did he put it?
He is
What did he say?
extremely
We should really start
mean.
playing movie lines. We should start
Yeah,
playing movie
exactly.
quotes.
Could he do it in a nicer way? Of course. Would we do it in a nicer way? Of course we would. But it's Paulie. But I don't think it's so bad that he should be the one that's put to blame for the reason why she gives birth early and then goes into a coma.
It's not the blame, but he didn't help the situation.
He didn't help the situation, but I think it was going to happen anyway. She was already stressed out, and she was already overexerting herself.
It was the straw that broke the camel's back.
If it wasn't for Paulie saying what he said, I don't think Adrian says when she wakes up from her coma. Because I think, okay, where did she have her aha moment?
Probably when she woke up from the coma and realized her husband's a bum.
I don't know. I can't believe that you're defending.
I'm not defending Paulie more than I'm going after her for not supporting her husband in this situation.
She didn't want him to get
so she doesn't talk to him anymore. She excludes him out of her life now because she doesn't agree with that decision. She did the same thing in Rocky IV. We'll see it in Rocky IV too. And he goes to fight Drago, and she basically
we're not talking about
walks
Rocky
away
IV.
from him. But this is her character.
We're not talking about Rocky IV.
I understand that. I know we're not talking about Rocky IV, but she still walks away from it.
Because Rocky IV is a better movie.
Don't tell people the plot of Rocky IV. Maybe they haven't seen it yet.
Well, they probably haven't seen this one either, so don't worry about it, Eric. She cares about him a lot. Adrian does care about him a lot, but it's to the point where she gives him the silent treatment because of the fact he doesn't do what he promised her that he was going to do, which was retire. But he can't be the man he wants to be without fighting. He can't get a job. She doesn't understand him at all. She doesn't show that she sympathizes with him in any type of way. If I would have seen some sympathy from her, but all she keeps on saying is, you could be whatever you want to be. That's it. And he's like, no, I can't. Nobody's letting me work. I've tried. I've gone to multiple places to try to get a job. I've worked in a meat place and they kicked me out.
You have the same criticisms then of Mickey, right?
My criticisms of Mickey is the fact that he says he can't fight, but then when he's picked on by Apollo Creed, all of a sudden he has to say, okay, we have to fight now. Mickey's not consistent in his arguments. As soon as he's insulted or his friend is insulted, he says we have to fight now. So there's a different argument there with Mickey, but I have a problem with how Mickey handles that as well. Do you think Adrienne handled it well?
She handled it like somebody who loves and cares for the person that they're with and knows that if he gets in the ring again, there's a more likely chance than not that he's going to get permanently hurt. If it's a detached retina, like you had said in your plot, because it's never said exactly what's wrong with Rocky's eye. But if that's the case, he could get permanently hurt, if not killed in the ring. Not to foreshadow anything that might happen in the future. Apollo is the heavyweight champion of the world, and he's going to try to get back in the ring with him again. And if he can't see out of one eye, he's going to get murdered in the ring.
Changes her mind later on and says, win. Isn't she a hypocrite then?
One, she's just woken up from a coma. This is all part of one of the major parts that's wrong with this movie. It's all convoluted. And it's all kind of all mixed up and kind of just all mashed together. She comes out of her coma and she sees that he's given up everything to stay by her side and never left her side the whole time. And it's her way of saying, I support you, go do what you need to do.
It's her way of saying,
and she gives
I should have never left your side when you needed me the most. That's what it's saying.
I guess. I don't necessarily agree with that whole statement, but it's kind of like that, I guess. And it's still kind of harsh. You're very, very harsh on her character. Her not wanting him to fight is out of love and care. It's not her being vindictive to him at all.
Well, no, I think it is being a little vindictive. I think it is being, you went against your word, you promised me, so guess what? You're not getting any until after the fight. It's the writing here that's driving me nuts here. It's because
that
of
would
the
be
serious,
Stallone's writing.
Right. It's the eye issue, but then everybody pretending it's like the worst thing that can happen, and then by the end, it's like the eye is never an issue. It's idiotic.
And it looked like in the ring he took a few shots in the eye too.
Of course he did.
Yeah, he took a bunch of them.
Yeah. If it is a detached retina, that's what caused Sugar Ray Leonard to retire early from boxing.
Right.
The first time.
And he came back.
So the proof is you can come back and fight from it. Not probably as fast as what Rocky came back from it, but we are talking about a Hollywood movie. There's so many things about this movie that just don't work. And it's writing-wise. And even Rocky's character, because if you want to get into the character of Rocky, instead of him being just an underdog, they make him into a moron. I never in the first movie took him as a moron. You never got the impression that he couldn't read. And if the fact that he couldn't read the cue card was because he has an eye problem, that needed to be more fleshed out. And we need to know exactly what was wrong with the eye. He mispronounces the word smile off of this cue card. They make him stupid. And I never thought that he was a stupid person. It's almost as bad as if they would have sent Forrest Gump into the ring to fight Apollo Creed. And I never took him for that. And he's not portrayed that way in the rest of the films in the series. It's just bizarre.
He's smarter than
He writes a poem at the end for her. He reads out a poem.
Well, let's don't be
for her
going.
that he wrote.
Let's don't be touting the poem. I mean, even that's
the poem
pretty stupid.
isn't the greatest thing, but he's able to read it and write it. So he is not stupid. It isn't like he isn't very good with words to begin with. He's a funny guy. He's able to tell a joke. People enjoy talking to him. The first movie, he doesn't sound like a complete idiot. He says things that are a little bit weird at times and make you feel a little, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, talking about the rape scene. In Rocky 1. If you haven't seen Rocky 1 yet. So.
You're bringing that up again? Oh, there's no rape scene in the first movie.
Like you said, I think some of these things are not fleshed out as well. Adrian's character is not as good as it is in the first one, in my opinion. Like, sometimes she's strong and sometimes she's weak. When he's buying all this stuff, that's where she should be getting stronger. When he's buying the watches and the clothes and the car, she kind of just says one little thing and then he says, no, I got it.
The way it's written, they make her into almost a pushover character. She puts up a first line of very weak defense. We should be thinking about this. Or you're making the salesperson's job too easy when they're talking about the house. But then it's dropped. Things like that matter in character development. Even going back to Paulie, it's little things like when he's destroying the house in the movie and he's talking about things that had happened in their past and how he's taken care of her and things like that. We get none of that here. As far as Adrian's character, it's hard. This is a credit to Talia Shire as an actress, that she makes the best out of what's given here. Because there's not a whole lot given, and she tries to make something out of this. But when you make her a weak pushover when it comes to buying all the stuff, it sets the character up for failure later when she's making a stand to make him not fight. It undermines that part of the character. Even if her standing up to him and saying, I don't want you to fight because you're hurt. And you could get permanently hurt. It's already been undermined by actions earlier in the movie. I think that's a problem that a lot of screenwriters fall into. They want a character to be something at one point of the movie, but they don't make it believable up to that point, or have done things earlier in the movie that undermine that position. And I think they do that consistently here, especially with Adrian.
Yeah, I mean, there's the part where he's doing the commercials, and she doesn't like the direction it's going. She thinks he looks stupid. He thinks they're treating him bad. But she has to remember some certain things here that she totally forgets. He has spent all this money on the basis of these commercials, and she needs to be there to help him make sound decisions.
And this would have made more sense. She should have said, these people are making fun of you. She never points that out. She doesn't go to anybody.
She just kind of agrees with Rocky.
It's frustrating. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, she doesn't like how it's going because she sees how it's going and sees how they're making fun of him. Even to the point where they put that ghastly makeup on him to make him look like his nose is all swollen and up. It's absolutely horrid. It's horrid. They're obviously making fun of him.
But she has no problem with Apollo making fun of Rocky. So this is where my problem is when Apollo goes after Rocky, she doesn't say anything. And then Rocky decides, you know what? I need to fight because I just can't do this. I can't be pushed like this. And she doesn't acknowledge what he's going through. All she cares about is him getting hurt.
That's the thing. If you would have made it when he's doing these commercials that she steps in and tells Rocky, they're making fun of you. Later, then she can say, instead of when, she could say, I understand. He's pushing you to a point where you have to stand up and fight. There's no depth at all to any of this movie. And that's a major problem, where there was depth to the original Rocky.
I think we like the word when she says it, but as you do repeated watchings of this movie, the more you realize that what she says there to him is not good. And then you go straight into the
training montage.
If you would have said when, and then he goes, why did you change your mind? And then she would have said what you just said, then that win means so much more and has more leverage later, during the training.
I'll tell you exactly what that win is for. To elicit applause from the crowd, to get that reaction. And that occurs through this movie so often. It's pandering is what it is.
This whole movie is pandering. The whole fight is pandering, yeah.
All of these characters take a step back. There's no advancement of the character.
Except maybe Apollo.
We get a little bit more of Apollo, and you get a little bit more insight into his character, how he operates. And I buy that. That's one of the things in the movie that I actually buy, is him being upset at the perception that he didn't really win the fight. Right. They don't need to go to the point where he fixed the fight. Here again, we take a good premise, but we took it one step too far. If it's just based off of the perception of the people that he's now a paper champion, and that a lot of people believe that he lost the fight, that's a legitimate reason for him to be upset. And that's a legitimate reason that he wants a rematch.
I think this is done all out of order, though. First of all, if you watch any boxing, you see even when a fighter loses the fight or wins a fight that they thought that they should have lost, they're in denial. They won't tell anybody out there that they lost the fight. Paulo, right there in the hospital, right off the bat, is looking for a rematch. That makes him look like he didn't think he won the fight. No boxer would do that. What should have happened, he should have came into the hospital gloating that he won the fight. And then Rocky could have came to his bedside and say, hey, did you give me everything you got? He goes, yeah, but I still won the fight.
Muhammad Ali would have never went out in
No
public.
Real boxer really would. That doesn't happen. But if we would have seen Apollo throughout the movie get a little bit more frustrated, get a little bit more, I need to get him back in the ring. Just this slow burn that basically is going through him that is forcing him to call out Rocky. Because you could do that while Rocky is trying to find a job, when he's not doing good at commercials. You could do that when Rocky's at his low, then you can start the Apollo attacks. They kind of miss an opportunity here for this to be Apollo Rocky movie. Instead, it is all Rocky. This movie is all Rocky, about Rocky, and it's unfortunate because I think there's a really good movie here to be made. And right off the bat, when I watch this movie, and the first thing I see is how Rocky 1 ended, and then they have to go to the hospital in the ambulance. First of all, doesn't the Spectrum have a hospital nearby? It looks like they have to travel like 5 or 10 miles away to get to the nearest hospital. They have to go over the bridge. I have to believe by a sports arena, there's a hospital nearby. And the opening music to this movie was atrocious. The music after this is fine, but it's just bad. And it sets the tone for me that this movie is not going to be like the first Rocky.
Well, what they did was they took the Rocky theme and they kind of sped it up.
It's disco.
Yeah. I agree with the music. The music, for the most part, is not nearly as good as it was in the first because they altered it. They sped it up a slight bit and added, like Eric just said, disco background to it.
Pretty much what they did.
I don't care for the fact that they start the movie by play the last 10 minutes of Rocky 1. In my opinion, that's a bad way to step foot into a sequel. You're retelling the end of the other movie and actually showing the end of the other movie. And it's like that right there is not a good omen for where this is going.
Not needed, because if you're watching Rocky 2, you've seen Rocky 1.
Yeah, you would think
it's like watching a TV show. Well, on last week's episode of Rocky lost to Apollo.
I know that we made the joke about Eric saying Burt Ward. It reminds me of the 60s Batman TV show. Why did they let the press come into the hospital? You never saw the press go into the hospital after Muhammad Ali or Joe Frazier or any of those guys. And you know that those guys went to the hospital after some of their fights and stuff. You never saw that. It just puts everything in a very odd spot. It's the speeches that they give there in the hospital should have been done in ring and make it a little more believable. Because, I mean, you even have Mickey going, oh, he really didn't win. The one person knows that he won.
It's okay for Mickey to say that. It's not okay for Apollo to almost say it, because that's what Apollo
Right.
is saying here. If you're wanting a rematch with him, you're already saying that he made you look bad.
Right.
And no fighter would allow that to happen. You wait till you get more media coverage on it, and then Apollo comes up and says, you know what, I'm tired of you guys telling me I didn't win the fight. I know I won the fight. And to prove it to you again, I'm challenging him again to another fight. And let's see if he's willing to.
Or wait till the rematch has already been inked and the contracts have been signed, and then have him go, well, this is why we're fighting again.
But if we would have just been able to watch the internal struggle with him going through the fact that they didn't believe he won, and then slowly see that he doesn't believe he won, that makes this movie so much more. And it's easy for me to say this because it's 40 years later. You know, it's easy for me to pick it apart because we've seen it so many times. But there's just something that's missing in this movie. I don't know how Siskel and Ebert liked this movie, because to me, this is too much of it trying to be like the first movie and not trying to be original and not trying to do things to stand apart from the first movie. I mean, even the fight sequences are not even as good as the first one. There's so many times where they would throw punches and you could tell they didn't hit each other, but they made the sound like they hit your head or they hit your body. We know you didn't hit them. This could have been edited a lot better in the ring, too. There's just so many problems with this. And when we're talking about characters, I think Paulo comes off a little bit better than most do. I think Mickey comes off a little bit better than most do, but I think Mickey's still better in the first movie because we had those little stories. The only story that he has is about training with chickens. I think it's kind of silly.
My favorite scene in the whole movie is when Rocky goes to Mickey and asks him to train him again, and Mickey does the eye test on him. Right. That's my favorite scene in the whole movie. Mickey knows that there's something not right, and he's going to get hurt, and you can see that he actually cares. This is where Mickey gets the lines here that Adrian doesn't get, where she's supposed to tell him, I'm worried you're going to get hurt and might die. That's why I'm saying you shouldn't get in the ring again.
Maybe Adrian should have slapped him, and he didn't see it coming.
You have both of them because both of them are on the same side. Ken, you had mentioned earlier about Mickey's flip-flop. There should have been something more to his flip-flop.
So like at the gym where they're giving him a hard time, you should see more of that bothering Mickey to the point where you see that he's slowly changing his mind. We don't get to see that, so when he automatically flips, when he's watching the TV set and eating that soup out of that bowl, and my parents had that same type of
My dad did too.
Yeah.
My dad did too.
I remember that bowl. But I love the scene too. When he's up there and he's telling him that every punk thinks they have one last fight in them. The writing here is really good.
Yeah.
Right there on the staircase. And then it's kind of ruined when you do the flip-flop.
Right.
I don't mind the flip-flop, like you said, is if there's a little bit more leading up to it.
Right.
And that's the same thing with Adrian. It's the flip, but we don't get to see her rationalize changing her mind.
They put her in a freaking coma.
That's why I'm saying that it's Polly, because that's the last thing she hears is the fact that he is going to get hurt because she's not there by his side. And I think she realizes this is true because if he doesn't train well, not only is something bad going to happen to that eye, something is going to happen badly to his brain. He might even die in the ring. There's a very good chance that Polly hit a note there that she understood, but by the time she was able to say anything about that, they put her in a coma. I don't know how I feel about the coma either. I think that's pulling on the heartstrings.
That's exactly what it's supposed to be.
But it doesn't last long. It's okay for the first showing. But when you watch this, those type of things wear extremely thin. It's like getting a coat and wearing it like a number of times and then realize that it's falling apart. You like it at first because how it looks, not like that jacket that Rocky picks with the tiger in the back of his.
That's horrible. Oh. Hey, you think that jacket's predecessor to Eye of the Tiger?
That's a good point.
It has to be.
Yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah.
Survivor saw that and they're like, yes.
Yes.
The tiger.
Like we've said, it sounds like they dumb him down a little bit. I wish that wasn't the case.
A little bit?
I mean, it's not like I think the character's done a 180 or a 90-degree turn. I think a lot of the Rocky that we love is still there, though I question some of the things that he does. Okay, why does he take Adrian to the zoo?
Because he feels comfortable there.
Is it because retards love the zoo?
Nice.
Wow.
I mean, that's what the guy said
That's
in the
what the
first
guy
film.
said in the first movie. Ironically enough, when I first put the movie in and I was watching it and that came on, I was like, he's taking her, really, he's taking her to the zoo. The thought crossed my mind. It was like, this is an odd choice. I guess my biggest disappointment about the whole zoo thing is when they get married, they didn't bring the tiger to the church.
He invited him.
I
He
know.
says, hey, what are you doing? But
Why didn't he?
Not only does he take her to the zoo, he proposes to her at the zoo. Why don't you take her back to the ice skating ring and propose there?
Exactly. That would make infinitely more sense.
Exactly. It's just some of these choices that Rocky makes doesn't make any sense to me. First of all, why doesn't he want to do manual labor? He's a physical guy. He's not going to get hurt. Why does he try to avoid?
They won't give him the job.
But first, he doesn't try to even get physical labor.
Yeah, he tries to cousin Eddie it and tries to hold out for management positions. And nobody's going to give him a management position. I mean, come on now. Let's be honest. They make him into a moron. He comes in there and he's talking like an infant now. They've regressed his speech back to into basically guttural tones. Of course he's not going to get those sort of jobs. And the part that I found literally offensive was the fact that he wouldn't go see the baby because she was in a coma and couldn't see the baby. That is so stupid, so unrealistic. It's not even in the realm of being believable.
No, I'm going to disagree with you on that.
It is infantile way of looking at the situation. It's not how a mature man would look at this situation.
Again, you're talking about Rocky.
I've been in this situation, okay, where my wife did not get to see our child right after she was born. And I was the first person, and I did not leave the child's side because I knew that my wife couldn't be with our child. It almost ruined the whole movie for me.
I don't think it's that infantile. I've heard other situations where husbands have not went to see their child because it would be one of those weird things where if she dies while I'm looking at the newborn, how am I going to feel about that? And also, I want to experience that together with my wife? It's our first child. Me and my wife couldn't see our first child the first time. I'm not 100% sure I would want to see it before she did. I think I would want us to see it together. But that's just me, what you did, and there's nothing wrong with it. At least that's just in my opinion.
It seems very childish.
I don't know if he's really worried about his wife, and we see him, he's focused on her and her alone. This is something that Eric brought up before the podcast. Does he go to the chapel or does he go to a church? I think he goes to the chapel, even though that chapel is pretty big for a church chapel.
That's not the chapel.
I think it is
There's
the chapel.
No way
Not
it could
the
be the
chapel.
chapel. Dude, the thing has vaulted ceilings.
There's no argument that he went to the chapel, but that is not the chapel. He went to the chapel
It can't
and
be.
then probably went to the church later, 3 a.m.
It's
in the morning.
huge.
His wife and his newborn are at the hospital. I don't think he's leaving to go anywhere. He's going to be as close as he can be because of the situation.
Well, then they shouldn't have shot it in a church.
I think it's perfectly realistic because, Catholicism, you go to the actual building of the church. Was that the church they got married in?
No, because that church was much, much bigger.
It's not a big church either.
It had vaulted ceilings in it.
But it had only 8 rows of seats.
It had a painted ceiling. It was like the Sistine Chapel.
I understand that, but it only had 8 rows of seats. So I don't think
watch that scene again
church.
now.
I will give you this. It is small, and if that is a chapel in a hospital, that's the most elaborate, most well-done chapel in the history of chapels in a hospital. The chapel in the hospital where I was born and where my sister was born is like the size of Matchbox.
I will say this. Ever since I saw Rocky 2 and I've been in a chapel in a church, I've always wanted it to be bigger. I'm like, this is it?
What it reminds me of, and if anybody's a Catholic, they'll understand what I'm talking about. Maybe Eric is right. Maybe it is a church. Some Catholic churches will have a chapel off to the side of the main church where they would do smaller services or smaller masses said. It's an offshoot of the main church. If this was part, like Eric said, and this is a church, it could have been a chapel off the side of the actual church. That is a thing. The church where my wife and I went to college has one of those, maybe that's what this is, part of the church, like Eric says, or it's the most elaborate chapel in the history of hospital chapels.
Some of these chapels, as I remember, did do those services. So if it's a bigger hospital, you could have a bigger chapel. So
I don't know.
That's where I'm going to. But back to the fact that Rocky is not as smart as he was in the first movie. I mean, it goes back to my line at the beginning of the movie about the condominiums.
I hate that joke.
You should invest in condominiums. And he's like, condominiums? He was like, yeah, I think it'll be safe. And he's like, I don't know. I never used them.
That joke.
And of course, he's talking about condoms.
That joke is not even 15 minutes into the movie, and that put me in a bad mood.
It's not a very good joke.
No, it's not. And that sets up about what level we're going to be at. This character is now taking a step back because he would never have said that in the first movie.
Well, even the people that are trying to get him to do the commercial said that he has brain damage. I mean, right off the bat,
you
have people that are accusing him of being stupid, and he's acting kind of stupid.
Oh, he is.
And
he's totally playing into every one of the stereotypical things of what people look at, what they think a boxer has. It's ridiculous.
It is.
Muhammad Ali's body broke down on him. It wasn't his brain.
Eventually it was.
But he had Parkinson's at the end. Yeah.
Here's the other thing I have a problem with Rocky is, okay, Adrian says you shouldn't fight. You do it without her permission. You go out and you do the news conference. And then after the news conference, you're looking at film and Mickey decides you're going to switch to be right-handed, which, I'm sorry, that's stupid in itself. I mean, if you're going to do that, don't wait till the 15th round. Do it like every few rounds.
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought too. If you're going to go to the work to change from southpaw to standard, when you switch back, it would be a thing that you would do earlier in the fight rather than in the 15th round. Because there's not enough time at that point. The bottom line is he had lost the fight. If we're going to start to discuss the fight and how ridiculous that is, I mean, we can. Is there any other things that you would rather touch on before
it would be the training. Where I was going with this is the training before Adrian has her coma. So he's training like a bum. But here's the thing. He's done all this stuff. He's done the film work. And then all of a sudden, everything he does for training, he's doing half-heartedly. And it just doesn't make sense. For me, it would make more sense that he was trying hard, but there was something missing and he didn't have that extra gear. But he was uninterested completely. He didn't feel like hitting the bag. He didn't feel like chasing the chicken. He didn't feel like sparring. He didn't feel like doing anything. I would have liked it better that he did those things, but it wasn't working. He was trying hard, but what was missing was Adrian. That would have made it so much better.
The only reason that he's doing everything so half-heartedly, that's why the win is the lowest common denominator. You're exactly right. He's training like a bum, yet he wants to fight.
Doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense because we're waiting for her to say win. Once it's win, then it's on like Donkey Kong, and all of a sudden he starts sparring with one of the greatest fighters of all time, Roberto Duran. That's who actually he was sparring with.
I saw that. I was
Roberto Duran
would have missed that so many times in my life.
Roberto Duran would have killed Sylvester Stallone.
I like how he taps his head afterwards.
Yeah, exactly, right? He would have seriously hurt him.
At least give me moments where he's trying hard. I can understand if you're doing it, like we'll see in other movies, where he doesn't train fully for a fight because he doesn't take the fight seriously. He knows that he's going to get his butt kicked.
Yeah.
So he should be doing some of these things with all he has.
Oh, yeah. Like they're training for a real title fight, and he's not. It doesn't equal up. I did read something of some people who actually live in Philadelphia. When he starts to train for real, quote unquote, they followed the path that he took to do the training sequence and the whole running, and it would have been something like 43 miles that he ran totally.
You're saying he can't do that?
I'm just saying he can't take the kids with them 43 miles away from their house.
He runs more than a marathon and a half to get to the top of the steps. It's schlock.
But people are buying into it. I mean, Siskel and Ebert are buying into this, and it's ridiculous how much they're buying into it. I mean, he takes these kids, they all run with him,
There's no adult with them. It's all kids.
It's
Every single one of them is a kid. Like you said,
It is
it's
very-
43 miles away. What is little Johnny going to do to get back home?
It is.
I think there's some lawsuits that are going to go happening against Rocky here about child endangerment.
The only thing he's missing is the paneled van with I saw candy on it. It's a little weird. I get what they're going for, and it's the fact that I get it that makes it so grown worthy. And just like, really, this is what we're going to do?
How long is he training for?
Mickey
3
makes it
weeks
seem
at the
like
most.
it's 15 days where he starts to take it seriously, and there's no way.
Especially to a guy who now is training harder than he ever has before, and he's going to be in better shape, and he's going to take it seriously, and somehow Rocky's going to take all this with 3 weeks of serious training.
By them saying that they're going to move him from southpaw to standard is almost like they're trying to make up for the fact that he didn't fight like a true southpaw in the first movie.
But he doesn't fight like he's right-handed or left-handed. Unless the announcers didn't say he's fighting right-handed, I probably would have not known.
Well, what do you think, Eric, about our criticisms, some of the criticisms that we're bringing up of the characters here?
I wish I could argue with you and put up a good fight, unlike Rocky.
If you want to get into the fight, we can get into the fight.
I just want to fight. Let's fight. Let's get it on.
Fights, duke it on.
In the first movie, we saw just enough of the fight. So it protected a lot of the cinematic boxing things. It's a problem that sports movies run into a lot, is making the sports part of it actually look real. Basketball's one of the hardest ones to making the basketball look real. And boxing is equally as hard. In this movie, they expose a lot of what is not good. First of all, I don't like the fact that Rocky has no defense. He fights the entire fight with his hands down at his waist. If you're really trying to protect your eye and that is your weakest spot, you're going to have your hands by your head and you're going to protect yourself. The fight should have been stopped based off the fact that he doesn't follow one of the simple rules that the referees say before every fight, and that's protect yourself at all times. He doesn't protect himself. His defense is to stop as many punches with his head as he possibly can.
Why doesn't Mickey teach him defense? Is kind of weird in the sense, like you said, because of the eye. Everybody's concerned with the eye. Well, if Mickey goes and tells Adrian, this is how we're going to protect the eye, that should help him survive the fight. Then we don't have to worry about the rest of this. You hit the nose on the head. There are more problems here because, first of all, we get more of the fight, but it's because we have Sylvester Stallone now directing. And the editing process is not as tight here as we see in the first movie. There's so many punches that we see that don't hit the head, but we hear that sound like a punch has been thrown and is actually hit. And it drives me crazy that they actually left it in the movie that way.
And you bring up the editing, and I read the editing for the fight sequence took 4 months because they continually kept bringing things back to Sylvester Stallone, and he didn't like it and had him recut it again. Somebody had to say something to him that this is what he's putting out there it's just not good. It's not believable. I had complaints in the first movie that perhaps it should have been stopped, but I get the atmosphere that they're going for in the first movie. They're going for that Thrilla in Manila feel of Frazier Ali, where they both felt like they were going to die in the ring. Completely understand that, get it, okay. This is a massacre. This fight should have been stopped. One, would the athletic commission have even granted them a license, knowing that he had detached retina? I don't think that they would have gotten the license to fight.
Probably not.
Then when it finally comes down to it, you get to the final round of the fight. Under no circumstances, I shouldn't say under no circumstances, because we've seen some boxers do some stupid crap before in the final round of a fight and get themselves knocked out. But of everything that they've showed for this fight, Apollo's won almost every round. Under no circumstances is a fighter going to go into the final round of a fight and start trading blows with a guy who could possibly knock him out. We're going 15 rounds instead of 12. Would Rocky really have enough punch after being beat like that for 14 rounds to actually land a knockout blow?
And we've seen fights like this where we've seen guys going back and forth, and
We're like, nobody's going to get knocked down because they're both tired. They both don't have anything left in the tank. And that's what it looked like. They looked like they were both out of juice, and there shouldn't have been anything on their punches. But somehow these punches are more devastating than the punches that they were throwing
round in the first
three rounds.
Where in the first movie, they made it seem, well, here again, we only got a brief snippet of the fight. But in the original Rocky, we get the fact that the punches that they're landing at the end of the fight aren't nearly what they were at the beginning of the fight, and that they've went through hell. Apollo just beat the living snot out of him for 14 rounds, and then decides in the 15th round that he's going to stand there and trade punches with him. No fighter would do that. They would be dancing around the ring and let the 3 minutes go and take your title and go home.
This is why there should have been more development in the Creed character, where the obsession of knocking him down should have been more apparent, that he didn't care about the title. He didn't care about anything. All he cared about was knocking him out. Should have been the focus. I don't understand why you had to have it be such a dominating fight. I think you should have had a close fight again, and you just don't know who's going to win here. And then when you both get knocked down at the same time, it has more meaning. Because we know if Apollo gets up, he wins. We already know this. If they both get up, Apollo wins. The only way Rocky's going to win is if he gets up and Apollo stays down. And I'm sorry, but for a guy who is obsessed with this fight, he couldn't give that one more extra. He was on the top rope, and then you make him fall down. I'm not buying that, because he's Apollo Creed. He's one of the greatest champions, they're saying, ever in the history of the sport. And this means more to him than anything, at least that's how they're playing it out, and you make him fall. I would have rather seen him get hit hard, fall down, when he get back up, stumble, like his legs would not let him get up. I would have rather seen that, but that's not what we get. We get this little, I hang by the ropes at the last second. Here's the other problem with this movie, and I'm pretty sure it's the same rules in 1979 it is now. But if Rocky knocks him down with a punch and Paulo falls down and Rocky falls down too, Rocky is not going to be counted out because a punch did not hit him to send him to the ground. He was thrown off balance. Can't be counted out by being off balance.
Right. I like what you said. If you take the Apollo character and have him almost be obsessive about knocking him out, and that's the only thing he's looking to do, that's all he wants, and then he essentially, the character on his own hubris, gets himself knocked out. You're telling a real life story then. You're telling a story of somebody who is almost maniacal in how bad they want something, and this is the hubris that gets them to lose what they ultimately want. That's a better story. Okay, Rocky knocks him down and possibly knocks him out. Why does Rocky have to fall down? All of a sudden now we're not in a boxing fight. We are in a who can get to our feet first fight.
I would think it would be more interested to have Rocky not fall down with him, but watch Apollo try to attempt to get back up. That to me is more interesting and actually has more weight, and it's not as comical as this is, especially with repeated watchings. You see Rocky's reaction as Apollo is slowly climbing. And if you have Apollo fall at the end there, that's more interesting to me than them both trying to climb up at the same time.
Or have him get up and walk around the ring like Mike Tyson did after he got knocked out by Buster Douglas.
Exactly.
Where he didn't know where he was.
He was trying to get the mouthpiece. He couldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not what we got. I think the best way to have done this movie was to give Creed and Balboa almost an equal storyline and go back and forth and have sympathy for both fighters. So at the end, no matter who won, you were happy with the results because you understood both sides of the coin. By the way, my last question here has nothing to do with the fight. Did Rocky repossess the Trans Am from Paulie? Because somehow
he did.
He got that freaking car back.
He's driving it back,
He gave it to him, and I would say, well, he had it because Paulie was staying over to take care of Adrian. No, that car was there way before that.
What?
Paulie was just taking over the payments. The car was always still in Rocky's name.
But it was still parked in front of Rocky's house.
Oh, Rocky took the car back. Oh, clearly.
Yeah, Rocky took the car back, and not only that, but somehow he miraculously knows how to drive. He's doing, like, spin-outs in front of the church.
God, yeah.
I mean, what is going on here? But anyway, I just had to throw that out there before we get to our review.
I guess ultimately the question that I'd pose to the both of you, is this a case of somebody who has been thrust into the superstar mold, as Sylvester Stallone was, and not having anybody to say no to him?
Yep.
Or is this a case of a guy who's earnestly trying to write something and just doesn't see the problems that are there?
I think a little bit of
Because
both.
the original director, Avildsen, he does not come back to direct this movie. They say it was because he had conflict. He had another movie that he was doing, but he doesn't come back to direct this. And
Because he
instead
probably
of,
realizes that most sequels usually bomb.
that's what I'm wondering. Instead of bringing in another director, we have Sylvester Stallone directing this movie.
Who's never
And
directed
now-
before.
Exactly. So
Right.
now we have, is it just a case of basically a monster where,
Well, yeah, because not only
Nobody's
did he
to tell him
write it,
no.
he directed it. So yeah, I think you get and you're running off of that Academy Award for Best Movie. You know, the movie is nominated for so many awards too. I mean, the
Right.
man could do no wrong. He is riding high on that power. And I think you're right. I think they look at it this way. They're like, you know what? The man did such a phenomenal job with a movie that wasn't supposed to do anything at all.
right.
And
Right.
now, well, is it $1 million budget? Thing made 200 and some odd million bucks. It might as well have been, you know, a high school people making the movie. That's the kind of budget it had. I think they're like, you know what? Let's give him free reign and let's see if he can do it again. And this thing made over 200 million again.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much the more that it could have been. It's just disappointing in that vein.
Well, I can't wait to hear your guys' reviews on this one. I think I have an idea where it's going. Why don't we go to the reviews? Ted, you know, I'm gonna do this for the listening audience who cannot see me, but I am going to write down what I think the review is. I'm gonna hold it here. Cover your eyes, Ted. All right, open them. I know this plays
Okay.
great on an audio podcast, but
We'll do the visual jokes for the audio listeners.
exactly.
This is so difficult for me because I wanted this movie to be better. And I do genuinely like the first movie. The first movie it's iconic. This is not iconic in any way. I don't like the direction that they took any of the characters. We get a little bit more of Apollo, but it seems like all of the characters took a step back here or just treaded water, and there's no character development. Even a crazy movie like Lethal Weapon 2 and had character development. And Rocky 2 is by no means the worst sequel ever made, because Rocky 2 is immensely rewatchable.
Go ahead, Ken. Say it. Say it. You know you want to say it.
Clerks 2?
There we
No.
go. It had to be said. All right, go ahead.
Absolutely not. Anyway, it could have been so much more. And I think with a more discerning eye or somebody to guide Sylvester Stallone through the perils of writing a sequel, I don't like what they did with the Rocky character. When I say offensive, it's not offensive like clutching my pearls offensive. It's almost offensive to the crowd. Like, we're going to dumb this character down for you so that when he wins, everybody feels like got a vested interest in him. It's ridiculous. It's like playing down to the audience rather than continuing to have him be the overachiever. It's like now we're expecting him to be a moron and achieve. And I just don't buy it. I don't like to be pandered to in my movies. Every movie can't be something that garners, months of thought afterwards either. At the end of the day, is the movie rewatchable? Yeah. I don't know when I would watch this particular movie again. It'll be quite a while. When we only have one scene that I really, really like out of a movie, it's hard for me to give it a positive grade. As hard as this is, for me, it's a C-.
Ooh, I was
because
close.
It doesn't do any of the things that the original did, and it actually regresses characters. There's so much rehab that has to be done for these characters to make them back to what the original was. And if memory serves me correct, I think 3 does much better as a sequel than 2 does. If that's the case, then there's something wrong with the movie that had at hand.
Did
And
Stallone
so that's why-
direct 3?
Yes.
So I guess we'll
Yeah.
see what happens when we review 3.
Ken?
I agree with Ted with most of the things that he said. There are some redeeming qualities in this movie because, as Ted said, it's rewatchable. Even though I get frustrated with it, if I'm flipping the channels and it's on, I most likely will stay with it and I'll probably watch it. It's not going to be one I'm going to search out. When I pull out my Rocky box set, I'm not going to say, ooh, I better watch Rocky 2 right now. That's not going to happen. But if it's on cable, I will sit and I'll watch it. The problem between Rocky 1 and Rocky 2, in my opinion, is Rocky was a story. Rocky is the main character, but all the other characters that he had seemed to have good parts written for them. This movie seems like it's just written for Rocky and what Rocky's going through. We don't get to see what Adrian's really going through with Rocky's decision. I think that would have helped a little bit with my acceptance of her basically giving Rocky the cold shoulder. Maybe if we would have seen more conversations between him and her about his retirement, they barely talk about it. It's almost like, you're going to retire, right? Yeah. Okay, good. Move on. That's basically how the movie treated it.
They kind of act as props.
And that's unfair because in the first movie, we got to see Adrian's shyness. We got to see her grow from being shy to being more comfortable with Rocky. And Rocky's extrovertedness being able to draw out her personality. We don't get to see that in the second movie. We don't get to see Paulie struggle with alcoholism. And Paulie in the first movie gets scared. I think he gets scared that Adrian is going to leave because who's going to take care of Paulie? Now, we don't really know, and we really don't care. These characters just don't have anything to enjoy about them right now. And that's unfortunate. It's still rewatchable because everybody loves the underdog story. But I think the problem here is direction. I think Sylvester Stallone, behind the camera, has made some mistakes that first-time directors seem to make. He shoots things the wrong way. It's been edited badly. The music is not as strong as it once was. And he doesn't know about camera angles, about how to shoot certain scenes from a certain point of view. We didn't even talk about that in this film because there isn't that. If it was shot differently and we were able to see it through Rocky's eyes maybe a little bit, maybe this movie is a different story and we see something better. And I don't blame Sylvester Stallone on this. This is probably a money grab. This is what sequels were, and sequels are to this day. At the end of the day, though, it's a film, like I said, I will watch again. I'm teetering on a C plus to B minus. I'm probably going with the C plus because I could already think of another Rocky film that I'm probably going to give a B minus to, and this is a step below that film. So I'm going to stick with a C plus.
Okay. Not as bad as I thought it would be. I can't argue with anything you guys said. I think I agree with everything you've said. You've made some really good points. You've hit the nail on the head. The only real difference is unlike you guys, I wasn't too crazy about the first Rocky. Kind of sets the bar a little bit lower for me. Yeah, I think definitely Sylvester Stallone's directing debut definitely had some work to be done. Clearly a money grab. It made over $200 million as a good sequel to a phenomenal movie, phenomenon as Rocky would be expected. I agree the characters definitely were not as strong as the first. I thought this one dragged a little bit long. I know the point that Stallone was trying to make, that pretty much everyone had given up on Rocky, but I think they spent a lot of time with him trying to find the job and going out there and showing the menial jobs that he was able to get. I think it dragged on a little bit. There could have been some different directions on it that I think would have made the movie a little bit more rewatchable. I'm not a real boxing fan, so the fight scenes, I'm going to take your guys' expertise on it, but everything you said perfectly makes sense. At the end of the day, though, the movie is rewatchable for me. It's not the greatest Rocky movie. Is it the worst one? No. There's other ones out there, obviously. I watched it twice. The first time I, watched it. The second time I missed a few things watching it the first time. So the second time really helped out a great deal. For me, it's not a C. B is really stretching it, though. So I'm gonna go B minus. B minus C plus, but I'll teeter on that B minus fence. But it's right there. It's got a lot of work, but Ken, you summed it up in the end, everyone loves an underdog. And this is another underdog movie, and that's what Rocky is. And people continue to watch him, and we've seen it, all the way through the series. People, for the most part, except for the movie that will not be mentioned of the Rocky series, but people do love the underdog movies. That's where I am.
Well, there's only 4 of them, so
I know there's only 4 of them. Then you got the Creeds.
Hey, don't diss 6.
The Creeds are good.
Oh,
Rocky Balboa. There's Rocky Balboa.
That's okay.
So,
one thing I want to add that I wanted to mention really quick, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. When he is being made fun of by Apollo Creed about the
chicken,
stallion chicken or whatever,
yeah.
I don't know why he decided to go with. Why didn't he go Italian chicken or something like that? Why go with 2 animals? But anyway, the fighters that are giving him a hard time, I don't think they would have given him a hard time because they would understand what it would be like to fight with an injury. I don't think they would have treated him as bad as, let's just say, the generic public would. If you had more fans giving him a harder time, that I can see. But people that are there to help him train, making fun of him, I think it's silly.
I think they were doing that to show the low point of Rocky's boxing career. You can't go much lower when your fellow boxers don't even respect you.
Yeah, but I think that's just going a little too far. First of all, Rocky went 15 rounds with the champion, and the champion, they know that he's trying to goad him.
Which is crazy why everyone gave up on him. That's what I couldn't understand. These menial jobs that people are offering him. Like you said, he went 15 rounds with the champ. He's a local hero.
He could have been a greeter at Applebee's.
Nothing here equals what it should.
You're right.
That's why nothing pays off. That's why it's such a disappointment. You guys have just pointed out another really good points as to there was a good story. Forget a movie, because movies are stories. There was a good story to tell. This was a bad story. It was a story that didn't advance the plot of the movie along. It just treaded water. It's like everybody acts up during the meal when you're a kid, but yet you get the dessert at the end where he wins. He never did anything here to deserve to win, other than they made fun of him for the entire movie. We're supposed to buy into that at the end?
Again, I think it's
ridiculous
because he's the director here. If he was focusing on just being the writer and the actor here, I think he's a little bit more of the changes, or the director sees some changes and goes Sylvester Stallone and say, you know what, I don't think this is working. We need to rewrite this. He doesn't get that because he's the director and the writer, so whatever he's already written down, he's just going to go forward with.
And he's coming off Academy Award gold.
Yeah.
You're riding high. People are like, let's put magic in the bottle, right? Let's do it.
And they don't care if this is a great film. They care about it making money.
That it did. And we'll end on that note as a money grab. Rocky 2, the money grab. And we'll be looking at Rocky 3 next. Is that one a money grab too? I'm duking it. We're duking it.
It's a money grab, but I think it has a little bit more weight. We'll look into it further.
See.
We're going to dive into that one next, folks. So
I'm holding my breath.
I'm looking forward to watching that one again, too. It's been a while. But come on, it's Mr. T. It's Clubber Lang, right?
Exactly.
I pity the fool.
Pain.
And I think we get to see racist Polly, so that's kind of cool. So.
Oh, yeah. This is the beginning of racist Polly. There we go. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. As if they couldn't have taken his character any lower.
Oh, yeah. If you want to see the biggest stereotype in Rocky movies, it's Paulie, and you're going to see it next on Rocky 3, so stay tuned on that one. Ted, where can they find us on the World Wide Web?
Well, we can be found on Twitter at movie_marquee with 2 E's, and whatever platform you're listening to us on, whether it be Apple Podcast, Spotify, or on Anchor. If you can, leave us a rating and review. It helps us get seen. It just does a lot for the podcast. So give us a 5-star rating, and we definitely appreciate it.
Ken, what are they saying about us on Facebook?
Feel free to join us on Facebook at the Movie Marquee with 2 E's. We have a couple of mashed up movies. Legally Blonde meets A Few Good Men, and Tombstone meets The Three Amigos. Kind of fun to check out. Look out for our next poll. Ted's got a series for Quentin Tarantino, and he's going to let our audience select one of the movies that we're going to review.
There are no losers in this category, are there?
No, there are not.
Wow. That's going to be awesome. Looking forward to that one. That is all the time we have on this episode, folks. We look forward to seeing you next time for Rocky 3. Thank you, and have a pleasant tomorrow, everyone.
See you at the movies.
See you next time at the Movie Marquee.